Joining me now is Sky News host and National Affairs editor at the Daily Telegraph, James Morrow. James, welcome to the program. Let's get started with what's actually underpinning this surplus. Labor's more than happy to spruik it, but what's interesting is how much of that is based on taxes from Australians. We're not just talking about the big taxes from the booming fossil fuel exports, but last night's budget revealed that 50% of Commonwealth tax revenue is going to be paid by individuals as taxpayers. James, when all the talk is on how tough the average household is doing right now, it's pretty galling to realise just how much individual taxpayers are carrying in this surplus.
Well, yeah, indeed, Amanda, and you hit on a real contradiction in this budget here. You know, on the one hand, as you point out quite correctly, they're essentially relying on wage inflation to help carry the budget, to help keep them, over the line and in a surplus, at least for this one particular year. And of course, thanks also to the many people in the mining sector who also got them there. But on the other hand, they're telling us that all of this spending, all of this essentially stimulus, because it looks very much like stimulus by another name, is somehow not going to be inflationary. So they can't have it both ways. And that's a fundamental contradiction economically in this budget. And I just don't know how Jim Chalmers, with all his happy talk around this, winds up ultimately squaring that circle. It's going to hit up against reality eventually.
Yeah, I think you're right. It was interesting to observe today, James, that when Chalmers was asked where he saw his budget in light of previous governments, whether, Howard had his battlers, Rudd had working families and Morrison had quiet Australians, Chalmers was coy in defining his budget by one group and responded in this way.
When it comes to our priorities in the budget, we made them really clear last night. We want to support people who are doing it especially tough, at the same time as we support the legitimate aspirations of Middle Australia.
He's really walking that tightrope of appealing to his growing left support while not as much trying to alienate the middle. But what was so interesting, I thought, was the texts revealed today in The Australian between Paul Keating and Jim Chalmers from several Saturdays ago. James, both men are very proud of their humble upbringings, Bankstown for Keating, Logan for Chalmers, and yet when Chalmers released his manifesto, he copped a lot of criticism for moving away from Hawke and Keating's model. Do you think he's trying to head back into that direction?
Well, it'd be nice to think so, but I don't really see it. That talk about aspirational middle Australia, I don't see where aspirational middle Australia, gets a Guernsey in this budget. They don't get any sort of handouts. That goes to people at the bottom end of the economic spectrum and to people at the top end of the economic spectrum. The twiggy forests and everybody who invests in renewables and things like that. But people in the middle, there's actually going to be more discouragement from doing things like, building your own wealth, not being dependent on government, that sort of thing. But this whole bit of, I guess you could call it hagiography by proxy with Jim Chalmers and Paul Keating is so curious to me because, first of all, wasn't Paul Keating supposed to be really on the nose with Labor after all of his talk about AUKUS? I didn't know we were rehabilitating him that quickly. But more to the point, though, I think it misses a fundamental point, Amanda, and that is this. Paul Keating grew up in Bankstown, a battling suburb in Western Sydney. His father, though, was the proprietor of a successful engineering supply business that couldn't get a loan from the banks here, even though he had a letter of intent from the Malaysian government to buy equipment from him, and he wasn't able to expand his business. Paul Keating took this experience with him his whole life when he deregulated the banks later on as treasurer, and, he has that experience that was very much about reforming, making things easier for people in the middle to do business, to succeed, to aspire. And I don't know that Jim Chalmers quite gets that same idea of, entrepreneurship, of working hard, building a business. I don't just know that that's the same sort of experience that Jim Chalmers thinks that he had and that he's trying to bring to bear as treasurer.
Yeah, I think you're right. The formative experiences of life come down to more than just your suburb or your postcode. And if we judge it by actions, the budget speaks for itself. There's nothing in there for Middle Australia. Just
Correct.
before we get around to a few of the other stories of the day, the Greens have yet again reminded us why they are nothing more than a group of petulant kids tweeting out, back in black, F your surplus, all very charming. Seriously, James, I know that when you're in the party that introduced the ideas of Lydia Thorpe to the Senate, you can't ask for a lot. But is this really the level of discourse that they're pitching for?
Well, it's pretty funny, Amanda. I mean, it suggests to me that, Labor's got itself a real problem with its junior coalition, and they aren't a coalition. Let's be real honest about that. Partner in the Greens. But also, I think, from the Greens, it felt a bit like a bit of a cry for help. It almost felt like, Lydia, come take us back. We miss you. We can be just as profane and stupid and offensive as you. Let's get back together.
Now, let's talk about the profound mess that the Victorian Liberal Party find themselves in. Friday is expected to be D-Day for Moira Deeming, with the second party room meeting to decide if she is to be expelled. But a group of Deeming supporters are pushing for a delay, as Deeming's still waiting for an explanation about her conduct that justifies her being expelled. Now, James, what is going on here? This is just the perpetual free kick for Dan Andrews, as they continually re-punish a woman for the actions of unknown, uninvited, unconnected men.
Well, and indeed, Amanda, they're punishing a woman for standing up for women. That's what this is all about, and let's not forget that that's the fundamental issue here. But what's happening with the Victorian Libs is so curious, it's so bizarre. As you say, it's a free kick for Dan Andrews, but it feels to me like they are in this mode where they're stuck thinking that Twitter is real life, taking advice from all these lefties on Twitter who don't have the Liberal Party's best interest at heart at all. They went to the last election with every moderate woke policy you could imagine, treaty, climate, all of this stuff. And did it get them over the line? No, just maybe, guys. Even in Victoria, people are looking for an alternative. I know it's crazy, Amanda, but, there you have it.
Hot tip, don't take advice from people who will never vote for you.
Bingo.
Some very worrying signs out of the construction industry. $2.2 billion worth of builders have collapsed since 2021. Construction failures have reached a 9-year high. Turns out Porter Davis was just the tip of the iceberg, and I confess this is something really dear to my heart, having come from a family that was always and has always worked in the construction industry. There's a lot of factors going into this: inflation, labour shortages, and in some cases unscrupulous builders. But at a time when we have a lack of supply in the market, this has to be just another blow to the aspirations of Australians to own their own homes, surely.
Well, it is terrifying. I mean, especially considering that you've got the government now saying that we want to get 1 million homes built in the 5 years from 2024 to the end of the decade. I don't know how they're going to do that because, as you say, the construction company is going under. There's supply chain issues. There's so many other issues in there, approvals, planning, everything else. I don't know how you get there, and I don't know how you get there without either dramatically subsidizing people's homes, which of course is a blow to aspiration and, investment and wealth creation and things like that. But also, it's just a road to ruin where you're not going to wind up getting people into houses. This feels very much to me like the Building the Education Revolution program of, I think 12 or 15 years ago, when the government tried to build all of those school things, the halls and the covered outdoor learning areas and everything like that, and, pushed up the prices of everything. It was a huge drama for the entire construction industry, made everything inflationary. There was pinch points everywhere. And it feels like they're in the same position as this without doing anything to actually support these builders, who, of course, are the ones who are going to have to get this done ultimately.
Yeah, there's lots that can be done, but none of it's been done in the budget just released. Now, thank you so much, James Morrow, for your time. I really appreciate your insights. We'll see you soon.